I will introduce our next guest. As you've already heard, she's going to be talking more from the agency side for you. Her name is Violeta Todorova, if I pronounced that right. And she's from OMG-London. And what she does very effectively is connecting brands with startups.
Cool. So as already mentioned, I kind of come from the agency side. So just a brief background, because I think it gives a little bit of context to maybe why I'm here. So I work for a department called AdTech Now, and if you had to summarize what we do in a tweet, it's AdTech Now is a trading division of SMG that offers UK and EMEA clients disruptive marketing solutions by partnering with tech startups and entrepreneurs. And essentially what that means is just like that image, you have the startup community at the top, the agencies with a specialized team within that agency, and there's our clients with their specific business problems. So kind of we launched in January of last year, and as with any startup or kind of new division, we've had our trajectory of ups and downs, and then kind of a peak, and then we also fell back down. But now we're doing all right. So since launching, we've had about 32 projects get off the ground, which has generated £350,000 of additional revenue for the agency. But the real reason is obviously we're here to talk about mobile, and my take is where startups and where agencies kind of play within that ecosystem. So the first kind of topic, which was touched on a little bit, is the year of mobile, which potentially started in 2012, but then kind of came back in 2014, and then it was mobile web, and essentially the year of mobile has been coming for a long time. But I would argue that that kind of has come and gone, and we've now hit the year of the startups. So just kind of looking at some of the top competitions or what the agencies are doing, or even clients like the Unilever Foundry, it's very much a more focus on kind of new, groundbreaking, disruptive technology, because mobile has come, and it's already playing a huge part within agency spend. So if we look at the kind of adoption trend, I think digital, kind of brands and agencies, the majority are digital, over 50% spend. Within programmatic, over 50% of mobile programmatic, yep, we're good. And then you have startups, which just now agencies are starting to get more and more involved in. And they're starting to kind of see how they can develop departments and start working with them to help connect our brands with new emerging technology. And I think this is kind of taking a quote from Malcolm Gladwell in his book, The Tipping Point. There is the paradox of the epidemic. That is, in order to create one contagious movement, you often have to create many small movements first. And kind of within the mobile world, we saw that with kind of apps, and then Facebook, and kind of big players creating their own apps and their own ecosystems, and then there was m-commerce. And then you had kind of mobile web, mobile search, and that kind of boomed into what we know as mobile today. And kind of the same thing is happening within the startup community. So you have AdTech, you have your FinTech, health tech, peer-to-peer tech, kind of all these little bubbles are disrupting the marketplace. But when you take it kind of all together, it means that there is kind of a huge paradigm shift. And I would also say that the industry is definitely taking notice, which is probably a good thing, kind of that we are making some noise. So obviously there has been a lot of coverage about mobile within kind of the news. So if you read Media Week, or kind of any of those trade press, mobile has been around for a while. And I think now more and more startups within the space are also starting to get attention. And so, but looking specifically at us, kind of what do we focus on when we kind of look at different startups and emerging technologies which we want to bring to our client? So what we really focus on is this part. So not kind of what's already taking off and they don't really need our help, kind of that's the late stage scale ups. They already know what they're doing, they have a revenue, they're making profit off that revenue. Then over here you kind of have your things which are probably a little bit ahead of the curve, so also thinking about consumers. So are consumers really on board with VR yet, and AR? Can Oculus Rift really kind of be in this space just quite yet? So what we really try to do is we focus on this, and we try and bring it to the early adopters and get that scale so that then those businesses can take on kind of the laggards and the late adopters. So it's really kind of about focusing on that tipping point. And I think definitely the tipping point for mobile has come and it's passed. It's kind of well established within the advertising ecosystem. And I think the new tipping point, at least in my opinion, for the next year is going to be startups. And yeah, just some lovely stats. Cool. And the second point, and kind of, again, from an agency perspective, is agencies are here to simplify and to help communicate with clients. So I don't know if you guys have seen the display Lumascape. There's also one for mobile and another one for programmatic. But essentially, over there, you have your brand. So you have your Samsungs and your Procter & Gamble's. And by the time it reaches me on my mobile phone, standing in front of you, it has to pass through all these different people. And each one of these people want a different part of the revenue within advertising. So I think on average, about for every £1 that goes in there, the publisher, so if I'm on The Guardian and I see an ad, they will only get about 40p of that. So within the ecosystem, it's already quite crowded, as you can tell. But that's really why agencies exist. It's to kind of help clients navigate this ecosystem, which is why I would also say, especially for startups, it's kind of key to be working with agencies because it's very important to figure out how you fit into this ecosystem and what you are bringing kind of that's new. And there's also a real question about how do you find the right person? So we obviously work in organizations and there are decision makers within each organization and you have kind of silos and different types of things. So just kind of a challenge from our perspective is you have over 2,000 new businesses just kind of within the Shoreditch area. You have over 600 people within our building, and then we have about 80 clients who are each working on 2 to 3 briefs at any given moment. That's quite a lot of different conversations which could go off. They could go off in tangents, they could go off in positive directions. You could be talking to the completely wrong person who has no idea what a PMP is. So I think it's really, really important that new opportunities are formed through comprehension and not just access. And therefore, one of our philosophies as a department is that you need to educate, translate, and empower. So that's making sure that what you are doing, you are actually educating people. So I think mobile went through that as well. It was about educating clients that it was a good environment to be advertising. How are we finding the location? Where is the data pass back? Where are we plugging in? So all these things had to happen with mobile. And now we're facing the exact same challenges when we have to bring VR to the masses. And my last point is around the word innovation, which is actually a word that I try not to use, and I kind of have a rule about not using the word innovation anytime an activation or planning team tries to brief me. And that's specifically because it's quite a fluffy word, and it's also kind of masks what the real problem is. So anyone who says they kind of want innovation probably means that they don't actually know what they want, or they're not telling you what they want. And also the word startup. So I kind of fall short of this because I love the word startup, but it scares clients. So it's definitely kind of using small-scale businesses that have an actual kind of product to sell is definitely what we look for. So rather than kind of being startups or looking for innovation, my call to action is let's be problem solvers. So let's make sure that there's actually a problem out there and that we're solving it. So I think really for long-term success, it's really crucial to move away from just kind of shiny new things and look for solutions that actually solve business problems. So kind of what was discussed earlier about mobile, until we kind of can show a direct ROI, or until we were kind of able to connect, let's say, via householding desktops and mobile phones, it was actually quite difficult to sell it in beyond it just being a new shiny device which we could advertise on. So I think it's just really important. I think mobile has started to solve some of these solutions, maybe not all of them, but also kind of new players are coming onto the playground more towards the new and shiny things, and only a very, very few amount of them will be able to actually solve the business problems which our brands are being challenged with in reaching consumers on a daily basis. So I think it's just really important about having kind of an honest and meaningful conversation about what it takes to reach the right person at the right time, and kind of communicate a message as a brand and as an advertiser. So I kind of leave you with be brave enough to start conversations that matter. And then I also have the feedback loop from the lean startup, because I think only once we start to kind of look at what is it that matters the most. Is it the attribution in a mobile ad? Is it the ROI? Is it that we need to be tracking? And then you can really, really find the players in the marketplace and the right solutions to help propose to clients. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Really, really interesting again, especially for me from the consumer side. And we are going to ask questions again, and again I'm going to put Ron as the first one because it's come to my mind. So you say that actually mobile has done its tipping point and it's all about starters. Is there a feeling in an agency side that you're almost not quite as relevant when it comes to mobile because of the conversation we were having before about Facebook, about Twitter, about these portals that are kind of snaffling up all the targeted advertising? Does that make agencies almost a bit irrelevant because they're a middle person in between all of that data?
I would say not really, because you're still, a lot of what agencies do is connect to media channels, so there's still kind of, you need mobile to tap into other things. And equally, I would say we've kind of moved away from mobile being its own individual channel, so you will rarely see kind of mobile as an individual line on a plan. Rather, it's kind of, you're thinking about audiences first. So I'm going to advertise on Facebook, and if my audience happens to be on a mobile device, then I will hit them with an ad on a mobile device, rather than it being kind of specifically within kind of, oh, this % of my ad spend is going towards mobile and this %. And that's why you've seen such an increase in mobile spend, is not necessarily because it's, oh, I need to be spending 60%. It's just, okay, Facebook, I want you to target people when they're available. And a lot of that inventory is actually on mobile devices. Does that answer your question?
That makes sense. Thank you. Now, who's next? Does anyone else want to ask the question? Yeah, gentleman in there.
In your role the next time now, when does a startup become more of a startup? When is a startup no longer a startup?
So again, why I hate the word startup is because it's really hard to define. But as a general rule, I would say our lower scale is you have to have an actual physical product built. So it can't be an idea, it can't be beta, it has to be kind of ready. And I would say we try to work with people who maybe have 1 or 2 brand case studies under their belts. But in terms of, I guess, where you reach full like market saturation, I think it really depends. So for example, my flatmate works for Innovid, and Innovid claims that they're a startup, but they're in many, many different markets. They're fully self-sustained. I'm not even sure they have to, do any series of funding anymore. But equally, I can see it still being a challenge to sometimes sell in because it is quite new. So if you look at kind of traditional brands, sometimes even getting them to do, digital display is hard enough. They won't do anything kind of below the line. But I'm trying to wrap up here. But yeah, I guess it really it varies on a case-by-case basis, doesn't it? Sorry.
I would actually follow on with that. Being a startup that's pre-revenue, it's hugely annoying when you go to, say, a pitch contest for startups, and then you've got the company up there with £10 million revenue, and they're calling themselves a startup, and they're pitching against somebody who's pre-revenue, and then it makes it really, really difficult within the startup sort of ecosystem to identify who that is. And you've got all the small companies, and we look at these guys and we're like, why are they even still a startup? So it is very confusing, and I think it would be helpful if someone in the industry somewhere would come out with a standard definition that says, if you have over X amount of revenue, you're no longer considered a startup, and you can't call yourself a startup, to make it a little bit more clear. Where that line is, again, I have no idea.
I think from our perspective, if we as a department don't have to do any selling in, so if your product makes sense and is kind of standalone and you know who within the agency to talk to, then maybe we're not as relevant. But what we find is that sometimes for example, scale can be an issue. So if, let's say, you are an app and you only have 2,000 downloads, no advertiser is really going to want to speak to you because you don't have the inventory or the scale to kind of be worth speaking to. But for example, if that SDK can plug into my client's app, or if I can somehow integrate it into my ad server and then serve that technology programmatically, all of a sudden that becomes quite interesting. So I think as a department, we will either try and help productize or kind of commercialize if it's kind of early stage, because also sometimes we find that, you know, you're great at speaking to investors, but then if I put you in front of a buying team that's going to question your CPMs and kind of where that data is coming from, sometimes we just find that they need a little bit of support there.
So it's about outlook, Tom, and what are the real recurring problems that you're seeing that you need to solve?
I would say it was kind of touched on earlier, but attribution. So I think a lot of the data that we're using currently is predictive. So we assume that, for example, because your phone is in a certain location between 1 and 3 in the morning for 5 days in a row, that you live there, but it's not actually 100% true that you live there. And then they'll also look at, let's say, the desktop that's within that location. So then they'll start to say, oh, I know I'm serving an ad to the same person on a mobile and a desktop because it's in the same household, so kind of by a householding. But there isn't actually kind of 100% security, like that cookie that you have on desktop that follows you around, or the mobile device. Those two don't necessarily talk to each other, and that's why, let's say, Facebook is a great environment, because they do have that first-party login data that allows you to connect different devices, so you really are cross-channel. And I think also looking at things like the Internet of Things, so kind of your household, right? You might have a Samsung fridge, but you have an iOS device, and then you have a toaster which is made by some other, brand, and all of a sudden, if you have a single device, I forget the name of it, but it basically connects all these different Internet of Things, that device actually becomes the most important, because it knows what your thermostat is at 2 o'clock, and it knows what your fridge is ordering when you run out of milk, and it knows what your mobile device is and that you're actually not home right now, but your car is. So all of a sudden, the devices that start connecting things and drawing insights from all those different data touch points to provide actual kind of 100% certain data sets together, I think is going to be one of the key winners within the marketplace.
Do you think that people are going to allow that? Do you think that people in homes are going to allow marketers free access to that device?
I think from a consumer perspective in terms of usage, I think it's a need. So I want my fridge talking to my car and all those kind of different things. So I think from the value exchange, like, yes, I think it will be valuable for me because I might want an Apple TV but a Samsung device. And at the moment, you need things to start talking to each other, because that's where the real value of Internet of Things is, right? It's in that automation and that process of objects talking to other objects. If I have a Fitbit and it doesn't talk to my phone, it's not really worth anything.
No, I agree that the device itself is necessary, but is access, so what I read into what you were saying is that once there are those devices, the agencies and the marketers will be able to have a single view of what's going on. What I'm saying is, do you think people are actually going to give you access to that device without charging you for it?
They might, and to be fair, I have met 2 or 3 companies in the last year that are trying to give people back their data. So, for example, I think People.io and Power of You are just 2 examples. And what they want to do is make you your own DSP. So I think that's quite an interesting concept. I think we're quite far from that. But I do think that, yes, for example, with ad blocking, which I'm sure is something that's going to be discussed, there is kind of this issue of, you wanting to own your own data, and a lot of people don't actually find it enjoyable to be followed around by shoes that they don't really have the money to afford to buy, but they looked at online. So I think from a user perspective, yes, there might be shifts, and I think once there is that certain educational job, both kind of how the ad industry works. I think before it's quite blind kind of push advertising. You knew why there was a TV advert because you were getting content for free. But I think now it's a bit more muddled, and sometimes when it's just data passed back, I mean, why does that app really have the ability if it's not producing any content? So I say there's a lot of issues in the industry, and yeah, that is one of them.
I think that's going to become, over the next probably 18 to 24 months, or maybe a little bit further out, I think that's going to become more and more important. It's probably something that we should talk about in more detail, but I know there are a couple of organizations that are trying to build sort of a framework around how that would actually work. Because the concept that they're saying is that the way the internet is set up at the moment, there's no way that the Internet of Things can work. It can't physically monitor as many items as will be on the Internet of Things on the actual internet right now. And what they're talking about is what's going to happen is each person or each home in each location is going to have its own internet. And what's going to happen is you're going to give permission to devices to join your internet. And then that will be the same for companies. So if any company wants any of your information, they will have to ask you for permission. So they will register with you. You won't register with them. So the whole idea is that you flip this entire relationship around the other way. So that as consumers, we will own all of our information. We will have one place that has all the correct information in it all the time. And if a marketer or a company, if we go buy a TV, if Samsung wants access to our data, they're going to have to ask us for it, and they're going to have to register with us, not the other way around. So it's quite interesting. I think it's something that we're going to have to think of agencies, and you guys are going to have to think about that as well, because the tide is. It feels to me like the tide is shifting.
We'll definitely have another discussion on that one. Really interesting. Yeah, definitely. I think there's a question in here.
Not so much of a question as trying to add on to that discussion. There. I run a startup that does targeted radio advertising, so something new. But we collect first-party data by apps, right? And I'm really surprised. What I found really surprising is when the radio stations apps open up, there's a prompt that says log in with Facebook, or then you can bypass and just use it without it. And we got something like 35% of the people, 1/3 of them, just giving us that information. So my question to that, yes, I have a feeling, at least at this point in time, for our age group, I hate giving Facebook information, but for many of the newer generation, I think they don't really care about, at least that's the way it looks like at this point in time. So it's a debate.
They won't care until somebody says,
I agree.
make money from it.
I agree.
As soon as somebody says, I have a way for you to make money from your data, from your own information that you're giving away for free, that will flip it around.
Yeah, but I'm also a little bit questioning there whether they really see the value of that money and all that kind of thing. I think it's a lot of education. They will. And I think you're right. It's a debate up there, and I think it's not a call yet. I think we have two different perspectives, and we have to see where the market goes.
So like she said, it's organizing already. There are a couple of companies out there that are starting it. There's some larger organizations that are trying to develop standard. So it is moving that way, and it may not be in the next 3 years, but it may be in the next 5 to 10 for sure.
Time will tell, by then something else will happen.
Yeah, definitely time to continue our conversations now. Thank you again to Violeta and to Liz, of course. Yeah, the idea now is that you continue having these debates, having these discussions. There is food, and actually it's National Sandwich Week this week, so what better way to celebrate? There were lots of sandwiches and drinks as well. Don't forget, give Mark a job and make lots of friends, and we'll see you on the 8th of June, which is in the next one. So thank you, goodbye.